Hello, everybody. Welcome to White Line Fever Kicks. And it's the first time we've had an episode in a couple of months. And what has prompted this? Well, for a start, the World Cup is only a month away. As of today, it's the 15th. If you're watching us live, it'll be the 15th just about everywhere. I'm just trying to think where it may not be the 15th still. Maybe in the middle of the Pacific somewhere. But anyway, also with the podcast has kind of changed hosts. We've gone back to Podomatic. So it's just time to get the content ticking over again. And there's a lot happening in the news in NRL, Super League, and the World Cup, of course. Welcome to the program for the first time, Matthew Geddes. Matthew, how are you?
I'm pretty good, thanks, Steve. How are you?
Good, mate. Now, people will be familiar with your name because you're filing stories on rugbyleaguehub.com like a demon. For people who haven't heard from you before, what's your background? You're an author, aren't you? And a very prolific author.
Yeah, I started writing books in 2014, and I've pumped out 96 over the last 8 years, most of them on rugby league. And so we've got the club histories, and we've also got the decades books. So rugby league in the 70s, 80s, 90s, etc., right back to 1908 in Australia. And we've just finished publishing some digital books on all of the scores for all of the clubs as well. So if you want to go to parallelpartnersbooks.com.au, they're all there for you to have a look at.
Great plug, and very kind of unobtrusive and a great segue. Now, I guess we might start. There's obviously a lot. I think we're just going to do 15 minutes here, just make it a bit bite-sized. But let's go back to last weekend, and everyone's talking. I saw the English journalist Caitlin Moran comment on her social media today. Apparently, some rugby player actually said in New Zealand called the Queen a dumb dog, and I'm getting mistaken for this person. It certainly makes life interesting. I mean, we're already moving on, aren't we? Because so much news has happened. She's been fined a quarter of her salary, stood down for a week, and the fine is suspended for a year. And it is a kind of an intersection there of, the NRL trying to be inclusive, but also having corporate partners, and it's sort of a core constituents, sort of trying to keep them on side as well. So quite apart from what you think of the issue itself, and I'm sure everyone's got a different view, from a PR point of view, it's a difficult juggling act, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is, and there's a lot to unpack. I mean, one of the things that's come out today is the discrepancy between the penalties for the men's and the women's rugby league, because the women's only play 4 rounds in the finals. So to say that you're taking 25% of her salary out, imagine taking 25% of the salary out of one of the men's players who did something similar when they play for 25 rounds. So there's an inequity there that has to be addressed. And there's also the issue of if you put something on social media, are you representing your own views, or are you representing the views of the NRL or the NRLW? And I'm sure there's something in the contracts that they signed that they can't bring the game into disrepute, but it seems to be a really grey area of what actually is bringing the game into disrepute. Yeah,
that's the thing. I mean, and I think we could talk about this for the whole 15 minutes and beyond. But, are the women's players who are either part-time or amateur, is it reasonable to subject them to the same expectations as far as, reputational damage as you do a full-time professional? But nevertheless, my own view on it was abusive language. So abusive language, basically towards anyone, if you're a professional athlete, is probably going to get you in trouble with your league. Even if we saw Ricky Stewart called a player, a dog, and get suspended. So basically, the rule of thumb is, and don't tell me about her account was private or only to friends. I mean, we've seen that with the WAGs going to court over here, the football players. Basically, if you put something on social media, it's a press release. And if you use abusive language at all, even if it's to a troll, you risk getting in trouble from your league if you are a professional athlete, I would say. And I even though I would be perceived as being, left wing, and I'm certainly sympathetic to the Indigenous cause, and I'm far from being a royalist. But I don't really, I'm far from being a royalist. I wouldn't set foot in town now or any time in the next week or the last 3 days. But I thought it was abusive language, and therefore it's quite reasonable that she would receive a sanction. That's what I thought.
I think that's fair enough. I think that's a fair comment. I think the 1 week ban is probably sufficient. The suspended fine, I think that'll be enough to make her think about what she posts in the future. And I agree. It's abusive language, but it's also just pretty disrespectful at a time when obviously a lot of people are in mourning. Whether that's right or wrong, that's up to them. And I understand the Indigenous culture as well. And there's some issues there that with the colonisation of Australia, and she might have some issues with that. But you're right. I mean, you can't just go out and say whatever you like on social media. And yeah, the Ricky Stewart thing really hit it hard because he came out and said somebody was a dog, and he copped a week. So I guess if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for her as well.
Now, I don't want this program to become media watch because who am I to sit in judgment of my colleagues? But I'll make an exception from time to time. And there's a couple of things on either side of the globe in the last week or so. The most recent one is John Wilkin on Sky saying of the new Wakefield coach Mark Applegarth, I don't know who he is, and I could sit here and say he's going to do a good job and he's done his time and he's blah blah blah, but I don't know who he is. And people on particularly Wakefield fans saying it's disrespectful and unprofessional. Well, on one hand, in an old-fashioned point of view, it is unprofessional for a journalist who has a round to not know something about the round. Fair enough. But John Wilkin is actually deliberately there to be entertaining rather than inform, I would say. And I think their only duty as professionals is to be honest. And if he says, I don't know who this fellow is, I think that is what a lot of people on the periphery of the sport are thinking about the new Wakefield coach. Willie Poaching, he saved Wakefield from being relegated, and he's been replaced by someone who's not widely known. So I think we get too precious. People in the sport especially in England, get far too precious about let's show everyone respect. It's disrespectful. Disrespect rates. So, him being on Sky and saying, I don't know who this guy is. Okay, disrespectful. I'm not respecting him. Fair enough. What are you going to say about it? What are you going to do about it? You know what I mean? And it's entertainment. And I'm sure Sky love the fact that that it's been shared all over social media. It's been discussed widely. And not only that, I think most people agree with him. They don't know anything about Mark Applegarth. And that is actually the most interesting thing about his appointment.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we live in the day now where it's almost infotainment, and you want to get the ratings up. And if that's what gets the ratings up, then so be it. If that's what Sky wants, that's fair enough. And I don't really know who he is either. So
I wouldn't go on there. Like I'm still consider myself to be, a journalist, even though I don't do it all day, every day. But so I wouldn't go on TV and say I don't know who he is, because I'm expected. People expect me to tell them who he is. You know what I mean? But for a former player who basically fills the role a little bit of a agent provocateur on TV, I think it's fine for him to go on and say, I don't know who he is. And I think a lot of people at home would be nodding along and saying the same thing. So I don't have a problem with that. The other thing is a friend of mine, Alan Katzman, his spat with Braith Anasta was covered by the Mail. And basically the panelists on 360, NRL 360, a program on Fox, were talking about the World Cup and saying, there's a lot. Why do we need all these teams in it? You might have seen the program. I only saw the quotes, so I'm not going to sit in. And Alan jumped and said, well, this is not good enough for people who are showing the World Cup and who are supposed to be experts to just be mocking it. And Braith Anasta responded on social media by calling Alan Katzman a derrick. And this was actually considered such a newsworthy clash that it made the Mail. What do you make of all that?
I think that's amazing. I can't believe that Braith Anasta took the bait for a start. And then he came out and said, "Oh, I'll see you watching Jamaica in the final." And now I think it's the coach of Jamaica has come out today and given it back to Braith. He said, "Well, hang on, we're supposed to be in the World Cup. We're supposed to be promoting the game internationally, and here you are denigrating it." So all power to Alan. I think I just can't believe that Braith took the bait. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah, no, the funny thing is being on a electronic media broadcaster who have the rights, like to what extent does the editorial interference impact you? So to what extent is your boss tapping you on the shoulder say you've got to talk this up? Perhaps at Fox, because it's on in the middle of the night, they don't care if their commentators talk it up. They don't expect the audience to be huge. They probably paid as little as they possibly could for it. So firstly, the quotes I read from the original program were pretty harmless, actually. They didn't say the World Cup's a joke, it shouldn't be on. They said who wins? Australia. Okay, Australia, fair enough. I didn't think it was that harsh. I thought Alan, was probably a bit trigger happy with his response. But the best comment, but then to call him a Derek for standing up for International Rugby League, I mean, why? And also, I mean, it's just that Australian attitude, which someone on social media said, little fish in a little pond laughs at sea. And that's kind of what it is. It's kind of like, well, seeing everything through the prism of the NRL and something not being worthwhile from an NRL perspective, whereas everywhere else, rugby league is a tiny sport. If rugby league can go from being the 64th biggest sport to the 63rd biggest sport in somewhere like Jamaica or Greece, it's a cause for celebration. And so what you're saying is it's not important that rugby league goes from 64 to 63 because we're 1 or 2 where we are, and that's all that matters. And that's just a very Australian attitude and one that I don't miss living in the UK, I must be said. So a lot of people here just sort of nodded knowingly and said that's pretty typical.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Australia has been the rugby league champion for a long, long time. But people forget that we haven't played a test since 2019 and we lost to Tonga.
Mm.
So, the World Cup isn't a fait accompli. I think New Zealand and Tonga and some of those other nations like Samoa and Fiji can really push, and England, of course. And, I think you've got to talk it up. I think you've got to get out of that mindset of just whatever happens in Australia or England or New Zealand is the be-all and end-all. And see some of these other countries that are coming up and they have the opportunity to compete in a World Cup for the first time and grow the sport, because if you grow the sport internationally, it can only be a good thing. You're going to get other players coming into the Super League and coming into the NRL from other countries, and that's going to boost the profile in those countries as well.
Yep, yeah, it's an old argument, very old argument. Some squads named overnight. The Greece one was named at a dinner in Sydney, attended by Nick Politis and all sorts of other people who've represented Greece in the past, like I believe maybe Braith. He didn't. I don't think he never played for Greece, but he might have been at the function. He's Greek. Obviously Lachlan Ilias and Pete Mamozelis are the main guys, the South Sydney guys in that team. And they're obviously a lot of the developing countries. They stay loyal to players who maybe are playing at lower tiers. Jordan Meads has been captain for a long time. They stay loyal to those players. I know Wales, for instance, they've got guys playing at lower tiers in Australia who, as long as they're playing, they'll get picked. The Kiwi squad's interesting because Jared Warrior-Hargraves is in the side and he may not play to the quarters because of his 3-match suspension. Now, I know they are trying to get warm-up games included in his suspension. The issue I've got with that, and I'm involved in organising a warm-up game, is that not all teams have warm-up games. So, Cook Islands aren't playing a warm-up game. Ireland aren't playing a warm-up game. So if their players get suspended, they don't have the same opportunity as New Zealand do to include the warm-up game in a suspension. So I've got a little bit of a... And also, I mean, the loophole there is that if I get a player suspended, let's organise a warm-up game. Let's organise one at the last minute, and then the suspension goes down by 1 match. So just from a procedural point of view, a boring kind of bureaucratic point of view, I've got some concerns about that.
Well, there's an easy solution there. Is if you're suspended during the NRL, that your suspension counts towards NRL matches, and you forget about the internationals. You should be able to play any game that New Zealand plays, and same for if you get suspended in the Super League. That way, that just takes that out. And
So do you really want to see a guy who punched a referee playing in an international?
Well, yeah, it's a good point.
We're either one sport or we're not. You need a clearance to play a rugby league match. You know, like where do you draw the line? You could see some guy knock someone out in a grand final and be playing a week later in a World Cup, win a World Cup for someone, and then go back and serve a 16-week suspension the next year.
I guess that's a fair point. Yeah, you got me there. That's a fair point. I guess you have to go back and see what the penalty was for Jared. I mean, he's got a very long track record. But maybe you just don't include the warm-up games. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe you say, well, sorry, but this is the World Cup campaign and these are the official matches. The warm-up matches aren't official matches. Maybe they call them like friendlies like they do in football over there. So maybe that's the solution. But, yeah, you're right. There's got to be some sort of solution where you cop the penalty, but you don't get an advantage from it.
Okay, I think we didn't want to go on too long, Matt. So don't forget to come and join us at rugbyleaguehub.com, where the amount of copy has increased exponentially thanks to the fellow I'm talking to now. And I guess this weekend we've got some big matches. So I don't know. Do you want to tell us what you think is going to happen this weekend? I'll get the kickoff times and all that on my screen while you give me your prognostications.
Yeah, well, you can go on rugbyleaguehub.com now and see the match previews in more detail. But I think there's a lot of pressure on Parramatta because Brad Arthur has only won 2 out of 9 finals. And for them to go out the back door again today, I just can't believe that that's a possibility for Parramatta fans. But in saying that, Arthur's come out and said, well, I'm just going to enjoy the occasion. I'm not even thinking about that, which is probably the right attitude to have. I think Canberra's got a lot of momentum. They've now won 5 in a row. They've just knocked Melbourne Storm out. It was the last time Storm didn't make the top 6 was 2004. So that's a pretty big effort by Ricky Stewart and his team. I don't know. It's a Parramatta's home ground. They should win. Everything points to them winning. But I think Canberra might just get them.
Yeah, I think Canberra got a bit of momentum now. So I'm tipping Canberra in that one. And Cronulla and the Rabbits. It's a huge one, isn't it, on Saturday? What are your thoughts there?
Well, last week they both scored 30 points, so you know it's going to be an exciting game for attack. They both had the most offloads in the competition as well with the second phase play. And it's really a question of Cronulla, 93 minutes. They got beaten by a 2-point field goal by one of their ex-players. How do you come back from that psychologically? And for South Sydney, how do you come back physically after being absolutely beaten up by the Roosters, even though you won the match? I mean, that was really a physical game. And with no Tom Burgess there either, you just wonder if Mitchell and Walker get on top early, South Sydney might get there. But if things don't go their way, they tend to panic a bit. And that's something that the Sharks don't do. And I think Cronulla might just sneak home. They've done too well this year to go out in straight sets.
Yeah, I like South. I like South. South. Right. In a tight one, South by 2, and over here in the UK, 2 games where most people think they know who's going to win. It's the 2 teams we expect to play in the grand final versus the 2 teams with the best late season momentum. And I guess these results will answer the question about: is it important to finish high on the ladder, or is it more important to just bide your time, maybe have a shocker for a while? And then make your run at the right time, because the 2 teams we're talking about with the late season momentum are Leeds and Salford, and the 2 teams we all expect to play in the grand final are Warriors, Wigan Warriors, and St Helens. Now, I like Wigan against Leeds. Obviously, Rowan Smith has been great for them, and they've had a great run of results, but perhaps their run is about to end. I think Wigan, with some of the players they've got, particularly Jai Field and also Bevan French. I think they'll be too good at Wigan tomorrow night. However, the great team of the last 5 years, St Helens, I think they look very shaky. Alex Walmsley's out. for the rest of the year and for the World Cup. He's probably, I would have said at the start of the year, the best player in this competition. I know St Helens were made to work a couple of weeks ago by Toulouse, and I just think Paul Rowley and Salford have got all the running, and they were 28-0 winners last week against Huddersfield, and I'm tipping a king-size upset, Wigan and Salford in the grand final.
I'm actually with you on this one. I think Salford has all the momentum. They're the sentimental favourites. You're seeing this all over social media. People are getting on board. And you're right. They've got all the momentum and they're going in at the right time. And St Helens, the golden era, might be coming to a close. And in the other match, I think Wigan definitely. Bevan French has been on fire this season. And there's talk he might be coming back to the NRL just based on his form in the Super League this year. But, it'll be a cracker of a match. Wigan versus Salford in the grand final. Who would have thought that would have happened at the start of the year? Yeah.
I don't think the league will be that happy because they'll have to work a bit harder to sell those seats. But okay, thank you. It's great the show is back and great to have you on board, Matthew. Thanks for all your hard work on the website, and we'll talk again next week.
Thanks, Steve. Have a good week.